Thanks for joining us this evening. It's great to see you, and great to talk about the Bondi Story Room project, which is a project we're very excited about at Council. Before we go any further, I'd just like to acknowledge the land on which Waverley Council sits is Gadigal and Bidjigal country, and pay my respects to the elders of those nations, past and present and emerging. And I think that everything we do here in arts and culture really does speak to, you know, a thread inside a much longer tradition, and it's a real privilege and an honour to consider the space we operate in every day and try to honour country in all that we do. Libby, can I just pass back to you briefly to just do some housekeeping and webinar etiquette?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So, so today's session, we have about a 20-minute presentation, and then we're trying to go for the rest of that as question and answers and your comments. We are recording this presentation, so for those who couldn't attend, we'll make it available on our website and on YouTube. And you should have received a video etiquette guide, which kind of outlines how this session will run. And that was with the email with the Zoom link. But just to recap, the default is that everyone will be on mute for the session. And then during the Q&A, I'll unmute as you ask the question, then mute on so we make sure there's no background noise. And then, yeah, so please don't be offended if I mute you. It's just to keep it moving, and also, yeah, see how it goes. We'll run through the presentation with questions at the end, but if you do have things you needed clarified throughout the presentation, please just use the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and then I'll kind of keep an eye on that, and if it's something that does need clarifying, I'll interrupt Todd so he can clarify that, or if it's kind of a question that needs a more lengthy response, I'll record it so we can make sure it's answered in that Q&A session at the end. So what else do I have here that I wanted to talk to you about? So if you have any tech issues throughout the presentation, you can email me. It's the communications@Waverley email address, and I'll try and help you. And if my technology is not up to scratch, then it is recorded, and we can also talk to you later if you do have questions that we didn't get to. And then we are finishing up at 7:30 tonight. So I'm going to keep an eye on the time. Probably about 7:20, I'll try to chime in and see how we're going with questions. If we get to 7:30 and there's a few other questions that haven't been answered, depending on time, we might just write them down and follow up with you guys later to make sure that we've captured everything that you want to say. And then when it comes to question time, I might repeat this once Todd's presentation's over, but when it comes to question time, if we can use the raise hand function of the Zoom tool. So if you go into participants, there should be a bit at the bottom of your screen that says raise hand, and this just enables me to see who is actually, so if there's a lot of questions, I can see which order it was raised in, so we can make sure everyone has their question answered. And I think that's all that I have to say, so I'll hand back over to Tanya.
Thank you, Libby. And hi, everyone. I didn't introduce myself at first. My name's Tanya Goldberg, and I'm the Executive Manager of Communications, Culture and Events at Waverley. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you, but not all of you, and I'm really grateful to everyone for joining us this evening. I just need to apologise if you can hear some you know, slightly average music in the background. My girls are watching a TV Disney movie called Zombies 2, about a high school where some kids are zombies and werewolves, but you know, they all get on by the end. So they've watched it for like the 18th time, but that's what's going on over there. So sorry about the noise. Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of background to this project before Todd gives us a really detailed presentation. The concept of the Bondi Story Room was put forward and developed by the Bondi Pavilion Stakeholder Committee, and it was a space that was clearly articulated and fought for by that committee and the community it represented. And what we've done with that foundation is work with the pavilion architects, Tolkien, Zuleika and Greer, TZG, to engage with world-leading developers of digital experience, digital exhibition experience really, exhibition experience designers, Grumpy Sailor, and they have worked with us on developing the stakeholder committee's directions into a final concept design, and that's the design that we're going to present to you this evening. We've had a subset of the arts and culture team here at Waverley leading this program internally. We've been really thrilled to have the opportunity to lead this project. The project team is led by Todd Fuller. On the call tonight, he's the Gallery and Curatorial Coordinator at Waverley, and Chris Murphy, who is our Cultural Programs Consultant. And we've also been working with Viv Rosman, who's on the line, who's our Manager of Arts and Culture, as well as the major projects team and the architects. So tonight we're going to present to you the concept design that's been finalised by Grumpy Sailor, who are, you know, these like highly reputable, world-leading digital experience design firm. And Todd will give you a couple of examples in the presentation of other work that they've done that you may have come across. And the purpose of the webinar really is to convey information to you about the design, for the room, to engage with you, our community, on how to seek, you know, on the fact that we're seeking your input now. We're seeking input on content for the room. And really one of the foundational ideas of the Bondi Story Room is that it's designed to be a living repository for community stories, community history. And it's our aspiration, and it's the aspiration of the concept design as well, for the Waverley community to be enabled and empowered to share community knowledge through the Bondi Story Room, and for that to be an ongoing thing. So as you'll see from Todd's presentation, I think the strength of the design is really in its reliance on community input and community ownership. And so hopefully that will be clear, and that maybe gives some framing to the stories we're seeking from you now, the content we're seeking to put into the room to display. So yeah, I'll throw to Todd for the presentation, and as Libby said, we'll do questions at the end, or any if you need points of clarification through the chat. But the presentation should explain it in full, and then we can talk more. All right, I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. Just confirming everyone can see that. Great. Hi, everyone. As Tanya mentioned, my name's Todd Fuller. I'm the Gallery and Curatorial Assistant for Waverley Council, and I'm really delighted tonight to be able to share this concept with you. The Bondi Story Room is such a significant and such an important project, and it's a privilege for us to be able to work on it. A bit of background, and I know a few people in the room were involved with this process, so apologies if I'm covering old ground for you. But as a part of the community consultation for the Bondi Pavilion Restoration and Upgrade Project, the Bondi Pavilion Stakeholder Committee recommended a Bondi Story Room. And the Bondi Story Room is basically a catch-all phrase for a space which is a heritage space, and a space which enables visitors and locals alike to learn about Bondi culture, but also a space that celebrates Bondi culture. And that's Bondi culture in all its aspects. The brief first put forward by the Stakeholder Committee requested that this space covers off a huge gamut of subject areas, and that includes Indigenous culture, so that's pre-colonial and post-colonial Indigenous culture, our current cultural events and attractions, so that's things like the Latin American Festival and its origins, as well as surfing history, surfing culture, and surf life-saving history. I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone in the room that Bondi Beach is the starting point or the epicenter of so many aspects of Australia's recreational history, as well as the rise of surfing and surf lifesaving as we know it. It's also a space that we hope is going to celebrate local culture across multiple nationalities. And so that's the diverse and fascinating and incredible stories of migration that led so many people from so many places around the world to live here in Bondi, as well as local history, landmarks, and the urban environment. In order to achieve this huge objective, we've been working, as Tanya said, with TZG and with industry leaders in museum, digital experience design, Grumpy Sailor, who have been helping us to develop the design and ultimately will help us to deliver the design. For those who aren't familiar with the current plans or architectural plans for the Bondi Pavilion, what we're looking at here is the ground floor. And as you enter from Campbell Parade from the west, the first two things you're going to encounter are the entry to the gallery and the entry to the Bondi Story Room. This is the first space, which is the main space of the Bondi Story Room. And then additionally, we have two extra spaces, one which connects the central corridor to the southern courtyard and another that connects the central courtyard to the north courtyard. Considerations for these spaces, though, is that the total footprint is actually only 121 metres squared, and that's split along those three spaces, two of which are actually thoroughfares that will also service the tenancies in front and be main passageways for members of the community. As mentioned already, there's really high expectations across a broad range of subject areas on what's actually quite a small footprint. And I also might just mention engagement to date. We've been having quite a few meetings with lots of different members of the community about this project and content for this project. But the very first thing we did, and the very essential thing that informed our first brief with Grumpy Sailor, was a synthesis of all the community consultation which took place from 2016 to 2019 around heritage, around the Bondi Pavilion, and of course the feedback and report and outcomes from the Community Stakeholder Committee. We've also met with Terry, who's in the room. As Tanya might have mentioned, or at least I'll like to mention that Terry's advocacy was very much the thing that drove the Bondi Pavilion Story Room. And we've met with him multiple times to make sure he's comfortable with the direction we're heading in, and also to make sure that we're capturing the right figures that are essential to the real Bondi story. We've also met with the Bondi Surf Bathers Lifesaving Club, who many of the people in the room will know are putting their own museum in around their own heritage. So we've got to be careful about what is the crossover with those two things while still making sure we tell their important story. We've also had a councillor workshop, regular reports to the Bondi Pavilion PCG, internal consultation with various other members of council with their own strategies that we need to make sure that we are working in tandem with as we implement the Bondi Story Room, and that includes our heritage officers, our business, and tourism coordinator, and of course the local studies librarian, because the Waverley Library hosts a wonderful treasure trove of existing heritage materials. We've also met with the Waverley Historical Society, who are going to be vital as we move forward, and the Multicultural Advisory Committee, who will be utilising to make sure we're tapping broad and diverse stories for the project. And my understanding is there's a briefing tomorrow with the Friends of the Bondi Pavilion and our director. But back to the exciting stuff. Grumpy Sailor, the consultants we've mentioned a few times already. Grumpy Sailor is a project-based company specializing in creative and heritage-based digital storytelling. So they're a company that are absolutely perfect for the Bondi Story Room project. They combine experience design, technology, heritage, and consultation in unique ways, and they're already working across theatre, gallery, museum, and film projects. Their clients is a bit of a who's who and a bit of an amazing roll call, but some of the key clients they work with are Melbourne Museum, Sydney Living Museums, Hyde Park Barracks, and the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. I've just got 3 examples of their work here. The bottom one is a projection mapping space. I don't know if anyone saw, a couple of years back, there was this incredible Alice in Wonderland exhibition for the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, and at the centre of it was this interactive playground that was entirely projection mapped. So as you moved objects, the projection responded and interacted with you. That picture there is Grumpy Sailor creating that space. Above it is the Road to Zero program, which was a really interesting community project based on technology with an integrated app that was designed to reduce roadside fatalities. And the top one, which is particularly beautiful and my personal favorite, is called River Connections. And this is the Learning Lab at Melbourne Museum. And the reason why it's particularly significant to this project is it's a space that was created with very heavy consultation with the local Indigenous community. In terms of our concept, I want to start with that west entrance, that space adjacent to the rear entrance, this room. And this is a space which we're calling the Bondi Mural. And the Bondi Mural is basically a digital tapestry of stories past and present. So as you enter this space, basically what you're going to encounter is a large touchscreen wall, which is a living, evolving, interactive story mural. And that mural is comprised of a beautifully illustrative perspective of Bondi from above. And that mural is populated, as you can see here, with all these little figures, by avatars, and each of those avatars is connected to a real, diverse Bondi local or past character with a story to tell. We anticipate, or we've been designing this space so that it can interact with audiences in 3 different ways. The first way is we want audiences to, on a superficial level, watch and listen. And we'll talk about each of these ways of interaction in a little bit more detail in a moment. The second way we want audiences to engage with the Bondi mural is we want them to explore the stories contained within it. And the third way, which is a pretty cool feature, is we're giving them the ability to wind the mural forwards and backwards in time, wind back the clock, so to speak. So to drill down into those interactions, in terms of watch and listen, when you first enter the space, it's kind of like a large-scale immersive contemporary artwork. You can sit and you can enjoy it as it shifts slowly over time. The mural moves from sunrise to sunset, clouds move through the sky, birds move through, the waves crash on the beach, and those avatars are living, they're moving, they're animated, they're swimming in the surf, they're surfing, they're strolling the beach, they're shopping at Campbell Parade. At any given time, no 2 interactions with the space will you experience the same thing. It is very dynamic and it is constantly changing. The other aspect that's really essential to this first level or this first experience is the soundscape we're going to implement. And that's actually inspired by some of our interactions with people in the room. In fact, it was Terry who talks about, as a young boy standing at the top of Hall Street and hearing the sound of Bondi or the waves crashing on the rocks. We passed that note to our designers who said that's a kernel of information to use in this soundscape. So we imagine that it's going to be a very immersive experience. And a very special and mesmerizing experience. And here we've got an artistic impression, a first draft. The final product won't look like this. It'll be quite different. But you can see here that element of time. Time is so important to this project, and you can see Bondi at sunset and at midday there. The second interaction I wanted to talk about is the ability to explore stories. This space is designed to be playful and a rabbit warren of stories so that you can spend as little or as much time researching and learning about the heritage of Bondi. The wall is set up with an interactivity to it. So as you move in the room, the wall understands where you are and it responds to your movement. And to try and pique your interest or compel you over to the wall, there are a couple of kind of first layer interactions built into the wall. One of them we're seeing here with this arrow is that a child has approached the wall in this artistic impression and the waves are moving in response to the child. Other interactions may be that crowd flocks towards you or moves away from you, that is designed to draw you over to the wall. And once you're at the wall, what it does is it offers you the stories connected to all those avatars that are populating the beach. And so when you touch on those offered portals of stories, what it actually does is it opens up an animated cloud of the archival material that we have connected to that figure. So say, for example, you've tapped on Wilhelmina Wiley, it might offer you some of the wonderful imagery we've found in the State Library collection connected to her and her time in Stockholm. It might offer you written text around her Olympic achievements. It might offer you archival footage or a sound recording or whatever other wonderful things we managed to find around Wilhelmina. The other aspect to this is there's an intelligence in the wall, and the intelligence is designed to compel audiences to explore further and dig deeper. So if you've tapped on Wilhelmina, you might therefore, in doing that, tell the wall that you're interested in certain groupings. So it might say, okay, the audience is interested in, the visitor is interested in Mina. So what we're going to do is we're going to offer other female swimming pioneers. We might also offer other Olympic leaders, other swimming key figures. And so those offerings basically encourage the audience or try and understand what the audience is interested in to get them to look and dig further, which is a really exciting intelligence. It's kind of world-leading innovation here. We're very excited by it. The next feature I want to talk about is wind back time. So what we're looking at here in the artist impression, that hand, is a gesture that invites the audience to place their hand on the wall and toggle forwards and backwards in time. And what happens as you toggle your hand is the local geography is going to also morph forward and backwards in time. So what we're looking at there is Campbell Parade that's been moved back to 1788. So in doing so, we're able to see what the area that is now Kemble Parade was like pre-settlement. And also the intelligence of the wall also will offer stories in relation to the chronological period that you are currently on in that area. So what we're looking at there is offering of significant Indigenous figures and stories around that time. And there you can see a further artistic impression as well as some of the source material that has been used to inform this, this aspect or this interaction, and will inform the 3D mapping that will happen for this interaction. Community engagement portal. As Tanya mentioned, this project is really about working with the community. The Bondi Story Room is going to be researched and going to be created hand in hand with the community. The Bondi Story Room is a living archive designed to grow in collaboration with the community. And so what we're looking at here is the interface we're hoping to launch with the new Bondi Pavilion website. And what this interface does is it says to you, the community, okay, you've got research, you've got stories, share them with us, because we're going to authenticate it, we're going to research it, we're going to add to it, and we're going to add your family, your friends, your key figures in as avatars and in as stories in the Bondi Mural. So it has a chance to live and grow over time. That means if you're a member of the community sitting on research, or sitting on the fact that your grandmother was Miss Bondi 1933 and you've got in your attic an album of photographs around that, or her swimming outfit or her trophy, this portal lets you tell us about that so that we can work together to map it and include your heritage as a part of the Bondi story. The other part of this that the nerd in me is quite excited by is the back-end interface, which is basically when we receive your research or we receive your content, we have the option to authenticate it, research it, work with it more, and we also have the ability to prioritize it. So there's a layer of priorities and a layer of intelligence built into the wall that says these certain figures are more significant and we want to make sure we're prioritizing them, and we get to decide where content sits within that framework of priorities in terms of whether a story is going to be a first level interaction or something that you dig deeper to find. And that's all the Bondi Mural space, which is just one of the 3 spaces. The other spaces, which are these corridors, have a different design that is still integrated and still designed to support and enhance the Bondi Mural. And we're calling this space Hidden Stories. And essentially the Hidden Story section, which we're currently exploring some further interaction for, but at the moment this is the design as it stands, is basically a very large louvered concertina print, sorry. And it's quite large scale. It feels as if it's built into the fabric of the building. And as you enter from the north or the south, what you're basically going to experience is a large scale image, probably yet to be determined, but likely to be a large scale aerial of Bondi Beach in a very similar aesthetic to the Bondi Mural. But as you move through the space, in the same way that toggle activation allowed you to move forward and backwards in time, you can sort of move forwards and backwards in time, in that the second panel or the second side of the louvered space is going to be densely curated with heritage material and text to contextualize it. And so it will be a playful space and a playful thoroughfare as you move to the 2 courtyards. Engagement next steps. So as many of you will be aware, our Have Your Say portal is already live, and this is the first of many stages where we invite the community to tell us what themes are important to you. What themes should we be considering for the Bondi Story Room? What key events, what milestones, and most importantly, who are the identities that are essential? Who has a Bondi story to tell that we need to know about? We've already had some really great research content coming through the portal, but we're looking to the community and asking, what else do you want us to do with this? What more can we do with this? The limits to it are this project has the chance to evolve and go in so many places, and we need to do that hand in hand with you guys. We're also going to be doing targeted engagement with key members of the community. That includes Indigenous researchers, the La Perouse Land Council, multicultural leaders through the Multicultural Advisory Committee, Surf Club personnel, as well as making sure we capture each of those key organisations of the Bondi Basin, local schools and their archivists, members of the council and general community. Another important part of our engagement or our sign-off or our steps moving forward is that the Waverley Council Cultural Advisory Committee is soon to be appointed, and one of the first projects they're going to be reviewing is where this is up to, and they'll be a really important part to lead and steer this project as we move it forward. With that, we're over to questions, but before I take questions, I've mentioned his name a few times. Terry is in the room. It feels very odd to give this presentation and not give credit to Terry, who was the driving force behind the creation of this project. And so I might hand over to Terry if he's interested in being the first of the room to maybe talk or comment, if you're okay with that, Terry. And we might have to just unmute Terry there.
How's that?
Perfect.
Gotcha.
There we go. Hi all.
Tilt your camera.
I'm sorry.
Tilt your camera down.
I have trouble with
Thank you, Terry.
Mark.
Thanks, Terry. And I'll just mute everyone else while you're talking.
There we go.
Framing.
There we go. Okay. Well, look, thanks very much for that. As I said, I have trouble with the TV remote, so I'll have fun in the Bondi Story Room, I can assure you. As some of you know anyway, look, I was born and raised, third generation, mother and father, born, married, etc. Bondi, grandparents, Bondi over 100 years ago. And now the fourth generation and even the fifth generation is following on, and we're still very, very committed because we were brought up with the Bondi way of life. And for, you know, a lot of early life, like a lot of people in Bondi, life didn't go west of Bondi Junction. So we are truly Bondi people. This is with the beach is almost part of us. And we feel very, very protective, but we're very excited about what's taking place. You mentioned the Stakeholders Committee, and a couple of members are on here now. And we went there to that committee, and I must admit, there were interesting times. We all expressed our views forcefully, but the beauty of it is that we all had Bondi. We're all Bondi at heart. We wanted to do what was the best for Bondi, and it came out very, very well. I had great respect for the people who were on that committee because I knew that we were all on the same page. I've been asked many, many times, look, you know, what drove you towards, you know, pushing this project? And it was quite simple. It was quite simple because in my travels overseas, I visited so many places, whether it be in Memphis, Tennessee, to see, you know, music museums, or in Harlem, New York, to see where jazz and soul came from, and up into Boston and throughout Europe and so on. And all the time I kept on seeing the heroes, the champions, the people who made things. They were all being exhibited. Their stories were being told, and they were, and of course they were quite famous. And I always would leave thinking, well, what about Bondi? We led the world in many, many things. We led the world in surf life saving. We gave surf life saving to the world. We gave them the iconic reels. The same with surfing, the same with the icebergs. We had, you know, swimmers from Bondi Swimming Club who were considered by International Swimming Hall of Fames, Olympic Hall of Fames, and endorsed by American coaches as the greatest swimmers of all times. And I always wondered, where's the acknowledgement? Where do the kids, our future kids, learn about their heritage? And sadly, there was nothing there, and the perfect place was always available. That was the pavilion, and thanks to some wonderful efforts by the Save the Pavilion crew, they stood up as Bondi people have done in the past. They stood up and kept it for the public, because that was the great attraction at Bondi. This was a public place. This is our history. This is our story. And I said that we've led the world, and I'm not going to go into names, but we certainly did. We certainly did. And it was appreciated, certainly around the world. Lots of people understood our heritage, yet it wasn't recognised. And of course, the next thing I heard was that there was going to be a 5-star restaurant going in the pavilion, and I wasn't real happy about it. So I thought, well, damn this, I'm going to do some documentaries on Bondi. I'm going to show the world somehow what this place is about. But thank heavens, sanity prevailed, and we've got the ideal place to tell our story. Now, whilst I've been involved in surfing all my life, I understand that Bondi, there's different perspectives. My mother would have had it, or did have, a different perspective to what my father or my grandfather had. And I fully understand that. And when I really got thinking about it and got into detail, I realised that things such as multiculturalism, like I grew up with multiculturalism before the politicians ever got onto it. And that was a way of life at Bondi. We're a melting pot. People came in, and provided you respected the beach and you respected your neighbours, then it worked, and it worked very well. And that was something that, in retrospect, I think we're very proud of. As I've said, I think to some of the people, I was eating goulash before I was eating baked beans because the neighbours would give it to me. I didn't quite know what it was, and some of the dearest friends came out from Europe. When you're doing your work, you'll find that some of the top swimmers from Bondi came from overseas, came to Bondi, embraced the way of life, and it sort of went on from there. But it wasn't only that. We then got, sort of further into it and realised the contributions that Bondi has made in areas, not only in swimming, but we've produced writers, musicians, even politicians, inventors. The rubber surfer plane, for example, is a Bondi invention. Even the Jaffa line is a Bondi invention. If you want to go into the detail, there was so much came out of Bondi. And the beauty of it was that nobody tried to lift themselves above the medium range. Everyone was accepted for what they were, what they did. And when you got onto the beach, there was equality. One of the great things that I just feel very, very sad about is that our heroes, our champions, not only in surfing, not only in surf lifesaving, but throughout the community, have not been properly acknowledged. And I really, really can see that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to put the record right. And I do believe that my greatest complaint has always been that people that don't understand Bondi make decisions in relation to Bondi. I've said this many times, and I've always used as an argument, well, who puts a sewage works around the corner of Ben Buckler? Who puts drain pipes out the middle of a beach? People that obviously don't understand Bondi, but Bondi people stood up and cleared up those problems. And I do believe that going forward, this will be an opportunity, I really do, to be able to put something in place so that the future generations can understand, looking back, where they came from.
That's great, Terry. That feels like a kind of a perfect way to, and really thank you so much for sharing a bit of background there. I think that would be kind of is a perfect place for us to open it up to questions from the rest of you here.
Sure.
Thanks, Terry. I do have one did come through to the chat from Sue, who's asked about whether about the sound, how the sound will work. Just before, Todd, I just also wanted to just reiterate for those people who joined a bit late, the way we're going to run this is if you have questions, please use the raise your hand tool, which is just down the bottom. If you click participants, there should be a sign that says raise hand. And that means I can just see the order of it so I don't miss the questions that they come in. And I'll ask you to unmute to ask the question, then I'll probably put you back on just to eliminate the background noise. You probably can hear my train right now, and then we can keep things moving. Thanks so much, Todd.
Thanks for that question, Sue. It's a really interesting question, is how is sound going to work in this space? And in chat, you mentioned, is it headphones? No headphones. We're actually going to be working with directional speakers. The wall and the space is multi-touch, multi-user. So those speakers basically isolate the sound near you so that if you're at one part of the wall listening to a sound recording, hopefully, and what we will refine in schematics, but absolutely will be able to do, is have the sound in one area isolated around where you are so that you can be listening to one video here while someone 1.5 meters down the wall can be listening to another video there, while someone 2 meters back may also be getting that more ambient soundscape. And those three things shouldn't be interrupting each other with the current sound design for the space. I hope that answers your question, Sue.
Thanks,
yeah,
Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. It's just, it's an interesting one because I've never seen that done before in that isolated in that cone, sort of cone of silence, because what you're saying is that there won't be a bleed. And so I'm just interested in the concept of, you know, it will be restrictive in one way of how many people can be in the room, because at a certain point, there won't be that space, if you like, between the participants, and actually that's a sort of an aspiration that's been sought for a long time, and I've actually never seen it done in any gallery space or any experimental space. Actually, never done successfully. So I'm interested.
Just to pick up on that, there will be, I mean, it's inevitable that there will be some bleed, but the idea of these directional speakers is that it's more focused and targeted. Yeah. And these are the things we'll be ironing out through testing in the next phase, next part of the project.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go to Gemma. You have raised your hand. I'll just take you just off mute if you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Hi everyone. Well, first of all, I'll just say that it sounds really fantastic, and everything that we could have imagined it could be. I think it's really great, and it sounds like you're having fun with it as well. And I know the work of Grumpy Sailor, they're great. I saw the exhibition in at Acme, and I love that. And some of the other spaces, I've seen that stuff where you interact with the avatars and things a couple of different times now. It's really great. I think it's a great solution and very, very exciting. So yay, all of us, and go Todd and the team. I'm really happy and excited for you, Todd, that you're working on it. It's a great one, isn't it? So my questions are just a bit boring, actually, about money. I just wanted to, because, you know, obviously we've been able to save the pavilion, and we're at this point now. And I guess so, and just in terms of the ongoing curation and programming and how far out you're sort of planning that, and financially how that sort of will unfold, you know, in the coming, not just 2 years, but 5 years or 10 years, and all of that, and what plan is in place for that. I guess, I can
talk to that first, Gemma, and then if you've got more questions, we can go back.
That's kind of, I mean, I'm sure, yeah, go for it.
Sure. So the way we've done it internally is that the design, the setup, the installation costs for the story room will all actually be covered by the major projects budget. So they are part of the build cost for the pavilion. And that was something that we were very clear about at the beginning, and was accommodated because it's part of the build, really. Like, the space is designed for, and they couldn't just give to the arts and culture team a bare shell and say, go ahead and fulfill this really ambitious brief. It needed to be properly resourced. So that's taken care of. It's part of the overall pavilion major project budget. The design development work specifically, and I guess what we've presented to you tonight is the end result of that, was $15,000. There's a great deal more for the budget of the room itself that has been set aside completely and is therefore to deliver the establishment of the space, all of the technology that Todd has described, the speakers, the sensors, the many sensors and projectors, as well as the back-end setup, the tech, the schematics, as Todd says. So that's really the setup cost. And then the ongoing maintenance and technical support costs will be factored into the overarching pavilion venue operating model. That's something that's currently being resolved, where that budget will sit in council, etc. And what those costs will be. You know, obviously there have been a whole range of cost estimates that, you know, council have done in the lead up, but, you know, exactly, you know, the finer details, the story room will now be part of that. But one thing that we've tried to do, and that Grumpy Sailor responded to, I think, really well, and Todd, you might be able to jump in here a bit more, is that the ongoing maintenance of the material should be very simple and fairly low cost. Once that digital setup is established, once the portal is established, then that just continues, it exists. So the cost is to council, and so we need to think from a staffing perspective in terms of resourcing about ensuring that Todd or someone like Todd is on board on an ongoing basis to manage. And we're also working closely with our colleagues in libraries and heritage to support us in what we know will be sort of ongoing work regarding the content that comes in. So what we're hoping is, you know, Terry, you said that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and, you know, certainly it is, but I don't see it as an end point. You know, it's an opportunity that will, we hope, stay open for, you know, for the life of the building and this room going forward. So it will be an ongoing part of council business, really, to manage the content that people continue to contribute to the story room.
Yeah, I mean, I look, I think it's great that the budget, I mean, that all sounds really good, where we're at now. I guess what I'm, you know, I mean, it's not a question I necessarily need you to answer now either, but what I'm worried about is like 5 years down the track and how it ages, and like in terms of not just the technology, but just the content, and whether, like, how that plan will be to continually evolve that stuff. Yeah, and while I throw this other quick question in, someone else I'm sure might have this as well, but I just didn't get the space things a bit. So the small room, Bondi Story Room space, you didn't talk about the content of what's going in there, did you, Todd?
Yes. Can I go back to your first question first?
Oh, yeah.
So in terms of long-term activation, one of the things we've built into our draft operating model around it is that public programming is a key part of this space. So we hope that every year we can add another 30 to 50 stories, and they may be achieved through research workshops or through just our various interactions with the local studies officer and the Waverley Historical Society, and any interested member of the community who wants to say, actually, I've got this story and it should be told. So in theory, not only will the space not be static in that the mural oscillates and changes over time, but the space won't be static in that it's every year going to have additions added to the content. We also, with the back-end interface, have the ability to highlight certain things. So one year we might decide that we're going to spend February making sure that all the figures connected to Black Sunday are prioritized in that February. And then the next year we might decide that in September, we're going to make sure we prioritize everyone connected to the 2000 Olympics. So we curatorially can constantly sort of massage and model this content so that it's never going to be two visits. So that for the visitors, no two visits are going to be the same. And as long as we keep adding that content, we've got more to play with, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow and grow. The second question around, just to clarify, so the mural space, the interactive mural, is actually going to sit in that room opposite the gallery. whereas the louvered space is the 2 corridors. Apologies if that wasn't clear.
Okay, so there's the little, sorry to be stupid. So the little room, so the mural's going to wrap around the inside of that wall in there.
Correct.
I see.
That's exactly right.
And so it'll be cornered kind of thing, will it? Or will it? Yeah, okay. And so because I was confused. So outside that room in the very big corridor, that kind of the thoroughfare thing, the wind tunnel, as we like to call it, that's not where the mural is. And that, because there's the Aboriginal floor mosaic there, and then there's that new little benchy thing that they're building in there, right? Okay.
And the corridors are not there either. So, you know, if you're sitting on the bench and the Indigenous mural is behind you on the floor, you're facing the doorway into the story room. And that's where the projection living mural is. And it's the corridors, if you were to walk away from that space towards the beach and go right or left, here we are. So yeah, if you're sitting on Todd, could you just sit on the bench for a second opposite the story room? Yeah, so and the mosaic is behind you there. The story room is opposite. And then if you walk away and walk towards the beach, then you can choose to go north or south and you get to those corridors. And that's where the static exhibition is. Right. Yeah. Yeah, okay. We don't want to put anything too high tech, high value, high risk in those transient spaces. And also they, as you say, they're a wind tunnel gemma, so they need to be better protected as well. Whatever we put there. So yeah, no, the materiality of those static, of that static display is quite important as well from a durability perspective. I mean, that's a question for the building in its entirety as well, but we're very mindful of it with this project.
Great, thanks Tamara, Todd and Tanya. I'll pass to Nicolette next. You've got your hand up.
Hi there, sorry for being late, I was working. I'm just wondering what will happen to the artefacts or whatever you have meantime, if it's a revolving exhibition. Have you got something in plan, in train with the library perhaps, or storage? I'm just talking about keeping artefacts and special objects.
I might handle that one if that's okay, Tanya. Because it's a digital space, we're actually not in theory accumulating objects, but any objects that are offered by the community, we have the option at any point in time of considering them under our accessioning and deaccessioning policy with the Library Local Studies collection. One of the reasons why we really wanted this to be a digital space and why it felt essential for it to be a digital space is because there's no condition control. And so as curators and as heritage officers, we were quite concerned about the thought of putting heritage artifacts into that environment on a long-term basis. And so that's one of the leading reasons why we went with a digital space. If a member of the community does, however, have a key object we want to include in the space, what we can do is document it digitally, and that could be either through photography, or one of the things Grumpy Sailor are looking at in their next schematic stage is even potentially 3D scanning objects so that they can exist digitally in the Bondi mural.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Did you consider the idea of having those apps that they have in museums where you walk up and point your phone at them, and you decided against it?
What we'll do, Nicolette, we've actually recorded this presentation. So I'll send it to you tomorrow so you can have a look. And then if there's any questions about that kind of thing, come back to us and we can have a chat with you about it.
Thank you, it sounds amazing.
Great,
really
thanks, Nicolette. Great. I'll pass to Mark. You had a question. And you're just on mute, so I'll try and unmute you. Sorry, I've muted you. There you go.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. The Stakeholders Committee was a fabulous process, and I want to thank Terry and Gemma, who were my colleagues on that committee. One thing I would like to ask at the outset is it envisaged that tour groups, Chinese busloads or whatever, who come through the pavilion, through the front of the pavilion, not the anus of the pavilion out the back, will they be charged for at this story room? Is there a way to monetize the story room?
We don't intend to monetize it. It's free and accessible to anybody. And that's a really important sort of ideological foundational premise. The pavilion is open for anyone to walk through and experience at Bondi. I just think it's worth noting, and I think, you know, it was noted in an earlier comment, that the size of the room will, by its very nature, limit to an extent the number of people who can be in there at any one time. As you've seen from the plans, it's quite small. And so we'll just have, that will be something that we will have to iron out when the building is up and running and people are moving through it. If it becomes something that needs to be managed, that will be handled by the venue front of house team, and we'll just work with that as we go. We're aware of it as a possibility, but no one will be charged to enter the story room.
Thank you. Maybe groups could be. Anyway, my next my next question relates to control. If two people are touching on avatars within the mural, who gets control?
I might handle that one. The mural's multi-touch, multi-user, so two people absolutely can be working on it at the same time.
How many people can be working on it at the same time?
That's a good question. I'll have to table that and take that back to our designers. But they've worked with similar interfaces, and multiple users has not been an issue.
Okay. So near field monitoring, many people could, I mean, I guess my question is if there is a conflict between users, how is that resolved? If there are too many users, how many points can you touch at once?
Oh, sorry, Tanya, did you want to jump in?
I mean, you may have a better answer, Todd, and Todd's across the detail of the tech more, but there will be, I guess we'll know that when we drill down into it in a bit more detail. We'll probably get to like a definite finite number, but there's just a range of things going on in the space above our heads that we don't, that aren't part of the kind of interaction. So there'll be interactive projection on the wall. There'll be a series of LiDAR radars, and they help the computer understand who's moving in the room and what's happening and how the wall should interact. So I think built into the programming will be prioritization of that when it gets to a kind of critical mass, but it should be capable of handling a large number, you know, within, according to like what's appropriate for that space, a large number of interactions at any one time. Todd, you might want to add to that.
Thank you, Tanya. That's really a really useful prompt. And based on my understanding of the LiDAR technology, it can actually understand the connection between the hand touching the wall and the body, and therefore present the information in the right space, is my understanding, my limited understanding of LiDAR technology with this interface at this moment in time.
I have one other major concern. As my job in the stakeholders committee was to be sort of technically involved. I'm a filmmaker and a theatre director. What you have on the floor plan, the current floor plan for a control room, what's called the server room, is just far too small. That server room needs to grow by at least, the wall needs to move. I can tell you the amount of technology that's going to be crammed into that fridge for computers, it will not work.
I might pick up on that one.
Thank you.
Because the server room outlined in this plan is actually regarding the broader building, whereas there's no server room currently situated adjacent to the Bondi Story Room. Because
well, kind of at the bottom there, you could move a wall about 3 or 4 feet and not impact on anything.
Actually,
I just feel that you're going to have, at some point in the interactivity in that building, various interactivity, there will be a stage manager in that room who'll be patching and monitoring and fixing things. And look, I've worked in theatre for 45 years. It's too small.
The actual interface doesn't for this unit, the Bondi Story Room, and I apologise, I'm only across the Bondi Story Room and not the broader building. But it actually all that interface is actually above your head in this ceiling, so it's not in a separate server room. And in that sense, it's also accessible because it's all in the ceiling.
So are you saying that the Bondi Story Room is then climate controlled?
No. None of it is air
The
conditioned.
computers will die within weeks.
Look, I'll take that on motion.
In a saline environment, those computers will die within, if not weeks, months.
We're working with commercial grade technology. What I might do is take that back to our designers and double check, but the nature of the environment has very much been considered in this design.
Well, unless the story room is climate controlled, if the servers are in the ceiling, you're in a highly saline environment. You're in a high traffic environment. I can tell you right now that stuff will end up in the server room, and the server room is not big enough.
All right, thank you for that, Mark.
It's good as a note.
We'll take that note on board. I appreciate it.
Well, it's just, that's kind of my job. You know, I've been working in theatre and film for 40 years. That I know this shit, you know, and that room is not big enough. And it's not very hard to make it bigger without compromising anything before it's too late.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. So we've got a couple of minutes left. We've gone through all the questions, or people have raised their hands thus far. Is there any final questions that anyone wanted to raise before we close up? If there's no one else, yeah, I can throw back to, I'll go to Nicolette and then back to Mark.
Hi there. I just wanted to ask, I'm sorry if someone's already mentioned this, but I have concerns about whether there is equal representation of women in this story, because there have been many stories told about Bondi where it's very male dominated, and I have a particular interest considering my grandmother was born here, my mother was born here, my daughter was actually born here, as in on the land. I've lived here most of my life, and I've spent the last 5 years fighting for the pavilion. So I have an interest in having women's stories. Can you assure me that there will be not only Aboriginal stories, but a good representation of women?
Do you mind if I take that one, Tanya? Terry commented before on the how Bondi, there's different perspectives of Bondi, and I think every single person in this room would have a very different perspective of who is essential to the Bondi story. And one of the key measures for us that we're working towards, and why this research that is done in collaboration with the community is so important, is that we want to try and make sure we are as inclusive as possible. So already I can identify, I can think off the top of my head of at least 15 women who've already been identified, and that ranges from our key female pioneers in the swimming area right through to Maleficent Preston in terms of politics, Rose in terms of astronomical innovation, in terms of the Dover Heights Research Station, but absolutely we want to make sure that we are getting the broadest possible cross-section across gender, across multiculturalism, also across different periods. We want to make sure that we are capturing the early as well as the recent histories, as well as the Indigenous history. This project, I mean, it's one of those how long is a piece of string projects, but we are absolutely working hard to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible. But also that's where that portal is so important. So if you've got research or you've got figures already in mind that we need to cover, please put them through the portal, email them through. Many people have already sent us lists. We put them all into a research program, and hopefully we'll get to as many as we can for the first iteration, but those that we don't get to for the first iteration, we'll keep adding as the years go on. So over time, absolutely, we're going to try and capture as many stories as we can.
Thank you. Great. Sounds great.
Great. Thanks, Nicolette, for that question. I'll pass back over to you, Mark, for the final one of the night. I'll just unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Question. Can the Bondi Story Room be seasonally appropriate? Bondi has a very different character according to the season. Winter is bleak. There is a bleak, you know, we have a classic kind of seasonal cycle here. Summer is very different to winter. What would be on display in winter is very different to what could be on display in summer. I'm interested in how the thinking is about the story room in terms of the seasons.
At the current scope, and we did have to draw the line of the scope somewhere in terms of the budget available and the time available. We did discuss that as an option, but decided that the duration of dawn to dusk, we would prioritize that, and we wouldn't have a seasonal interface. So at the moment, I'm afraid that this project can do a lot, but it can't do everything, and that one isn't currently in the scope of the design.
Thank you.
Having said that though, Todd did mention earlier that there is the capacity in the back end to prioritise different stories at different times, Mark. So, you know, if
Exactly.
as we get to so that we can certainly do, and that's another kind of layer of you know, kind of curatorial management really, which we find very exciting. So for example, we could choose to prioritise stories leading like August into September annually, or certainly every 4 years around Olympic season, around the Olympics and the beach volleyball, for example. I know that's not seasonal, but of course that's just a moment, and we can do that with any moment. So we can prioritise summer stories at summertime and different kind of winter stories at winter time, and the back end should facilitate that very easily. That's the idea.
Right,
that's the idea of it, so that it is a changing experience each time.
Well, that's behind my question. So thank you very much.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Like I said, this is recorded, and so we'll put it up online and send it around to you all as well, so you've got that as a record. If you've got any questions following, we do have an email address called Bondi Story Room at waverley.nsw.gov.au. But of course, if you do have stories or themes you want us to know, head to Have Your Say Waverley and fill out the information there. And also we've got a survey up about the community radio station that's going to be in there. So if you've got any thoughts to share, please let us know there too. So with that, I'll wish you all good night. Thanks so much.
Good night. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.